Back, gone! Big fly!
Chucks it up, it's caught! Dagger!
But she's gonna hit the gas. 1-on-1, boom!
Hey, welcome back for episode 51 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. After today, we'll have one more episode for season 1. Last week, the NBA had some bad news with some of their 7-footers. Joel Embiid and Victor Wembanyama were ruled out for the season. I again debated re-recording because right around the time I posted the episode, the news on Embiid dropped. It's just not a very good time to be a 7-footer right now. Then there was the NFL Combine and the Tennessee Titans' plans for the number 1 pick. Abdul Carter out of Penn State, the guy most people think is going to go number 1, is also dealing with a foot injury, but he's skipping surgery and planning to be good to go for the Penn State Pro Day. There are still some other players I could see jumping over him, which I told you about last week. Then finally, in the NFL tight end rumor mill, Travis Kelce is coming back for next year, and Rob Gronkowski is definitely not. As we kick this episode off, I won't pass up on a good conspiracy theory when I get a chance typically. You've heard a good number of them from me if you've caught most of our episodes to this point. You may have also heard of a soon-to-be 42-year-old quarterback in the dimmest twilight of his career by the name of Aaron Rodgers. Now let me lay out my vision for a concept. I'm still workshopping the name of it, but I've narrowed it down to either the New York Packers or the Green Bay Giants. They both have a similarly disgusting taste when they come out of your mouth, but what do they mean? Just this week, the Jets released Aaron Rodgers' best friend and longtime favorite receiving target, Davante Adams. Both of these men are going to be Hall of Famers. Rodgers has a bunch of different records and 4 MVPs. Adams has almost 12,000 yards and over 100 touchdowns. They've influenced each other's careers more than any other person, probably. Some might also point to Matt LaFleur, the Packers head coach, with both of them in Green Bay. But the fact that they joined up again this past year after the Jets made the in-season trade with the Raiders, and they both went on to be productive in that partnership again, it suggests otherwise. Other players have been accused of, we'll call it playing GM before. LeBron James probably being the most famous one. A lot of people think he controls some crazy things. The coaching staffs all around him, the front office, and everybody on the roster. Many were also suggesting Tom Brady did a lot of that in the latter part of his career with New England. I probably won't be able to quell anybody's whining about that. And honestly, I don't even really intend to because I think it makes for some great memes. I'll also say that Aaron Rodgers absolutely has some outsized pull compared to what he should at this point. And he's gotten away with some complete shenanigans before. Where do we even start with all the dramatics with him? There were problems of this kind before he ever left Green Bay, but one thing I think I can point to is training camp with the Jets last year. Rodgers missed several days of the mandatory portion of camp for a vacation to Egypt. That is a huge red flag. Remember, in 2023, after he came to the Jets, he played all of 4 snaps before he tore his Achilles, and the on-field reps were going to be huge coming into this summer for determining where his recovery was at. Their now fired head coach Robert Saleh, who we've talked about ad nauseum, made it clear the absence was unexcused, and then Rodgers was fined for it. Nonchalant as he's known to be, Rodgers was pretty unbothered and basically said it was a bucket list type of trip. Even before that Egypt trip, though, Aaron started assembling his Green Bay Jets, I suppose we'll call them, by essentially forcing New York to sign one of his other cronies in receiver Allen Lazard. Then this year at the deadline, he does essentially the same thing with a vastly more talented, more productive receiver, as I said earlier, with surefire Hall of Famer Davante Adams. Now we get to this offseason, and what have the Jets done already in the 2025 offseason? Told Rodgers that he's going to be cut, released Davante Adams, and they let Allen Lazard look for a trade. If you're looking to connect the dots and thinking about what team could benefit most from a package deal, especially if it becomes a trio for all of these guys, the New York Giants are still, I think, by far the best suitors. I'd like to think that if everything I'm laying out here happens, it could be at least a little bit organic. Maybe the Giants sign 41-year-old A-Rod and they still draft a rookie quarterback. Then if Rodgers really struggles hard, like, say, Kirk Cousins did with Atlanta this year, they could just bench him and you force him to mentor that young guy for a while. New York clearly does have a need for a veteran receiving presence too. They targeted their rookie receiver Malik Neighbors 11.3 times a game. That was more than anybody else, including Triple Crown winner Jamar Chase. Adams is gonna put whatever team A-Rod goes to really high on his own list of destinations, and the Giants have around $50 million of cap space right now for the coming year to make it happen. If Rodgers were also to demand that Allen Lazard be sort of a throw-in piece, it wouldn't move the needle that much. He has about 3,000 yards in 83 games for his career, or about 37 yards a game. Almost all of that with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, and he's mostly been in Adams' shadow. Even so, cronyism is alive and well, right? Technically, a bunch of other teams are in play for this whole trio. You've got the Raiders, who did trade Davante Adams midseason this past year. Would they really want him back? And would he want to go back with what should be a reduced contract? There's the Browns. Their offense obviously is pitiful, but they miraculously are still pretty close to the most expensive roster in the entire NFL. They did just restructure Deshaun Watson's contract again, putting a bunch of money into a signing bonus that they can then spread out. Even so, they're in a struggle with the very top of the salary cap. And a reminder, they went 3-14. The Titans still have the number one pick, right? But if they decide not to draft a quarterback at number one, maybe they could roll with Rodgers and select a mid-round quarterback. However this final chapter in Rodgers and probably Adams' career ends, I'm betting they're going to do it together, if for no other reason than Rodgers' seniority and clout. Now a weekly dip into the grab bag upcoming. If you're like me, you spend a good deal of time on the ESPN app. I have to do a fair amount of that just for research and not as much for pure enjoyment, but I did see an interesting story about the NCAA's newest varsity sport this week. Women's flag football is coming to the Atlantic East Conference for this fall. To answer your immediate question, no, I hadn't heard of the conference before. It is Division III, which might mean it doesn't have the best reach or audience coming out of the gate, but I think the niche is totally there to be filled. For right now, women's flag football is in a program called the Emerging Sports for Women program at the NCAA national level. What you need to know about that is basically there needs to be at least 40 schools across the country competing in it at a varsity level in order to put on an official national championship event. The Atlantic East has 7 teams right now, so unless a number of other conferences get on board within the next couple of months before fall sports are back, those 7 will probably be the only ones, so they'll just play for their own conference championship. Even so, it doesn't seem to me like women's collegiate tackle football is too far away, if I can put my Nostradamus touch on this one. Where the money would come from at each college or university and how much money it would bring in is yet to be seen, but I fully believe that tackle would be a bigger draw in the long run than flag. I think there's definitely enough women that would be willing to play it, that would love to just absolutely wail on each other, and if the NCAA feels that way too, then we'll see. I also saw a story this week about the baseball team at George Mason and the best half inning of baseball possibly ever. I apologize, I wasn't watching George Mason versus Holy Cross live, shame on me. But being the lover of stats that I am, having dabbled as a statistician, I did go back and watch the highlights. Then once I got into the rabbit hole, I watched the Jomboy media video on it, just because I think they do a great job, and I'd love to do those kinds of recaps for YouTube eventually. I'll link that video in the description. It went like this. In the second inning of a game on this Tuesday, March 4th, George Mason scored 23 runs. The Chicago White Sox might not score 23 runs in the first couple weeks, you know what I mean? It was an all-time Division I record for runs in a half inning by 2. Funny enough, 21 had actually been done a couple of times in the 80s by UPenn and Wichita State. That is a phenomenal number. I've broadcast some pretty nuts baseball games with some box scores that don't make any sense, and when I'm doing highlights for those, I usually go by the numbers and let those tell a lot of the story by themselves. When it came to this fateful second inning, how about 28 batters that came to the plate? It's typically a good sign when you have one guy that gets 2 at-bats in an inning, but the leadoff hitter for George Mason had 4 at-bats just in this second, 2 of which were hit by pitches. 11 hits in an inning. It's pretty cool, but not totally impossible or unheard of, and probably something that people have seen in travel ball or whatnot. George Mason also took 8 walks in the inning. Holy Cross used 5 different pitchers who combined to hit 5 batters. Even the final score was fun, 26-6. The line score is even funnier, 26 runs on only 13 hits in 7 innings. When some old head or some nerd says that's baseball, this is exactly what they're talking about. Please stop saying this sport is boring. It's just always going to have a prominent place in my heart for reasons just like this. If there's a more unpredictable game, I've yet to find it, and baseball is still fun, people. I'm also known to really enjoy all-time records of all shapes and magnitudes. You may also remember that I dabbled in covering the NHL, especially in the playoffs last year. I've still never had an opportunity to broadcast hockey before, which I think would give me a huge boost in understanding of it, but I do know what it means to score the most goals of anyone in history. That's exactly what the Capitals' Alexander Ovechkin is hunting down right now. I think the ability to get on the ice consistently as a teen or a 20-year-old is awesome, and you see the same thing in the MLB pretty often too. You're able to have more years producing at a prime level the earlier you start. Ovechkin's in year 20, and like everyone else that's ever had any chances at an all-time record, he's trying to chase down the great one, Wayne Gretzky. Like I say, I love stats, so I've spent a decent amount of time just scrolling the record boards, and it gets boring after a while when you realize so many of them are just completely out of reach, where it's Gretzky and then everybody else. In taking another look at them now, I'm tempted to even launch the theory that Gretzky might be the most statistically superior athlete ever. That includes LeBron, that includes Tom Brady. Think Babe Ruth, Michael Phelps, Serena Williams. I mean, everyone. That wasn't meant to be the focus here, but when stats are involved, it's a fair discussion. When we come to Ovechkin, he's sitting on 885 career goals at time of recording. That is 9 behind the GOAT. Gretzky also played 20 seasons, so it's actually a really fair head-to-head comparison. Now, if Ovechkin can just get 10 goals and 1,250 assists in the next 20 games before this season's over, he can happily retire as the all-time leader in both. The number of assists Ovechkin would need to add to his career total, for context, would place him in second all-time if he had 0 assists to his name currently. Long story short, there are certain records which, whether it's due to the game being played differently or the evolution of the players themselves, rule changes and things like that, some things are just untouchable. Still, Ovechkin's going to have a great chance for those 10 goals and the all-time record. The Capitals' next game is going to be against the Red Wings on this Friday, the day you're hopefully hearing this. So you're almost tempted to pencil him in for at least one. The Wings' defense, especially on the penalty kill, yikes. The Capitals are way at the top of their division, but I can't really see them giving him any veteran days or not having him in the lineup right now for any reason. If he is physically capable of going out there, I think you've got to trot him out every single night. Everybody's going to know the numbers by now and how close he is. For the final word on stats today, I'll throw out a few records or milestones relevant to modern players. Justin Verlander said when he got to spring training with the Giants, he wants to be the last 300-game winner in the MLB. And while he's the active leader in wins by 46 over Max Scherzer, he still needs 38 more. JV just turned 42. He is one of the best ever, but guys don't make enough starts. They don't pitch deep enough into those starts. And pitchers on bad offensive teams, they just can't get as many wins as they deserve. Is Verlander even going to pitch 2 more full, effective seasons to be able to have 38 more wins? That's pretty dubious. Oh, and the all-time record has never been more out of reach, by the way. Cy Young, the man the award is named for, won 511 games, which was almost 100 more than second place at the time, and most of the men on that leaderboard only have their photos in black and white. Obviously, I'm going to hope that JV can get to this one, but it feels a long way away, and then I think he's right. If he achieves it, nobody else is ever going to get 300 wins again. O.J. Simpson's 2,000-yard season in 14 games from 1973. Oh boy. Hear me out on this. So there are 3 more games now in the NFL regular season, but the 143 yards a game average, I think that is untouchable. The Eagles' Saquon Barkley this year went over 2,000 in 16 games, had the best all-around season a running back's ever had, and he was 18 yards a game shy of that. I don't think anyone would get enough carries to have a shot, no matter how good they were on a per-carry basis. Plus, I think defenses are just too good at adjusting nowadays. Finally, there's going to be whatever numbers LeBron ends up with. He just went over 50,000 total points in the regular and postseason combined. He has the game-scoring double-digit points streak that you might have heard about at 1,278 at time of recording. Technically, that could be broken Thursday night against the Knicks. I'm not very good at math, but I'd wager it won't be. And I believe Kevin Durant has the next longest active streak at about 200 games. There are some other things LeBron's going to have too. Again, whenever he decides to hang it up, a lot of that stuff I think is going to be untouchable. So that's just a few thoughts on where some of the best athletes of our era stand in relationship to all-time records or milestones. And that'll wrap up episode 51. One more week until we're at a year strong, or you could argue that happens at episode 53. I did give you a new intro and outro, so I hope you like those. It's a mix of the arena soccer stuff that I'm doing right now, and as always, some old clips I have on hand and I get to remix sometimes. As you're hearing this, I'll be deep in prep for the Michigan High School Swim and Dive State Finals. That should be fun and a great addition to the resume. I still feel like doing a collab and making it all about a March Madness preview, but there's always logistics when you're trying to put out a weekly episode, and I wasn't going to miss an upload right before we got to a year straight. There's still just about 2 weeks until the tourney starts, so if I can get that put together, I will. I finally started watching enough to hang in there about it. All told, watch some good sports. Do it sometimes for enjoyment, sometimes to learn, and I'll talk at you next week. This has been episode 51 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Thanks for joining me.
Field. Back, gone! Big fly.
Chucks it up, it's caught! Dagger!
She's gonna hit the gas. 1-on-1, boom!